Welcome to the Learning Series, proudly sponsored by the Scholars International Group here in Dubai, where we're all about innovating your mind and igniting curiosity. I'm your host, Karishma Bhansali Mehta, and with each episode, we dive into fascinating topics, fresh ideas, and perspectives to inspire you on your lifelong learning journey. Today, we're here to talk about a subject that many women resonate with, but find very hard to approach. We're talking about money. How do we ask for it? How do we manage it? How do we handle it? And how do we invest it? And I'm so happy to break this down with financial mentor and coach Beth Clay, founder of Finance Her Well here in the UAE. Welcome, Beth. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, Beth, you created Finance Her Well to empower women to transform their money mindset and achieve their financial goals with clarity and confidence.
That's right, yeah.
How did you get to where you are right now?
So, yeah, it's been quite a long journey, really. But I always start with kind of like my personal story and my background of watching my dad as a financial director when I was growing up was very, very good with the finances. And I always remember him sat on the old IBM computer in the hallway looking at the stock market, always wondering, what is that? Like, what are these stocks and shares? And then it took me through to kind of going into my 20s. Unfortunately, like he passed away quite suddenly. And I always wanted to kind of ensure that my mum, who obviously my dad had dealt with all the finances all of our life, until the point of when he left. And so my mum was left on her own to handle the money. And whilst he'd been very good at kind of setting us up for life, that was quite a shock to the system. And obviously watching my mum kind of manage that whilst managing, as three children. And I think that really hit home to me, actually, how many women there are out there who are, in relationships where the husband or the father, brother, who have always had to dealt with the finances. And when there's situations, and actually, women unfortunately are going to be in a position where they're going to be on their own at some point in their lives and having to need to look after money. And so obviously I educated myself around money. And it was during my sort of 20s when I started kind of naturally coaching and advising friends and family around how to manage money. That I thought, gosh, there needs to be something around this, because women aren't doing this for themselves and not realizing the importance of this matter. And so obviously having kids in my 30s and kind of really educating myself more along the line. And it took until like quite recently that I thought, actually, I need to create a movement around this, which is why I created Finance Her Well, to really empower and educate women around how to manage money, but also to think about tying it into their kind of wellness aspect as well, around kind of having a healthy relationship with money.
And it's so important. It's such a timely movement that you're creating. So thank you for doing that. I mean, you talk about the fact that you saw your dad investing, etc. And I mean, look at these numbers that I've researched. They speak for themselves. According to a UBS report, women are a sizable economic force, adding on average USD $1.7 trillion to global investable wealth. This was between 2016 and 2020. In fact, over the last 9 years, they have been outpacing men in terms of their own personal wealth. By 2025, female investors are expected to represent 35% of total global investable wealth. That is a huge chunk.
Yes, a lot.
And now you've got the flip side, right? 20% of us maybe are barely financially literate. Some 75% of women globally are just so overwhelmed by it. And in general, just find the subject so difficult to broach. I'm going to take my own example. Perfectly well-educated woman. I'm a trained journalist. I've lived all over the world. I've worked all over the world. I have 2 children, 2 boys. I still find it so hard to talk to any man in my life about money or ask for it. Why is that?
Yeah, so a lot, I mean, it's a global thing, right? Wherever we are in the world. And it's like you said, it's so common. The amount of people that I speak to and I'd say what I'm doing, like, oh my goodness, this is so important. Finally, there's somebody talking about this, and you're totally right. I think a lot of it comes down to societal norms and the history of obviously how money has been managed in relationships. Unfortunately, I think there's still a long way to go in terms of bridging that gender gap. And it's like you say, there's huge stats around it. Women are shown to to do extremely well with wealth. And I know we'll kind of come on to that side of things soon, but you're right. Money has for such a long time been seen as a taboo. Don't talk about it. It's, like politics and those sort of things. We
Yeah.
don't talk about it. We don't confront it. And a lot of time, and it goes back to also similar things like mental health, these things that have always bubbled along and been there. And people have wanted to ask those questions, but either felt intimidated that they can't ask them, or, it's not culturally normal to ask those questions around money. So I think for so long, people have just got stuck to that kind of, well, the man will just do it, like the father will deal with it, or the brother, and I think in this region in particular, those are the conversations I'm hearing, is that if they haven't been doing it, and I know the UBS report talks that as well, women look to the brothers, the uncles, the fathers to teach them about this, not those female role models where they haven't seen women, talk actively around money.
And this mindset, like, how young? I mean, when does this kind of seep into our subconscious? Like, when did this happen that we just felt like we've known about it? I mean, we've taken finance courses in university. I did economics still.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've studied a lot around kind of the psychology of money, and actually our mindset, our relationship with money and those thoughts are formed as early as 5 to 7 years old, which is early. And it seeps into that kind of ingrained almost in there. And a lot of that is to do with observing how our parents handled money, in particular in the way that money was handled in the family, in the household. And then obviously culturally, as we grow up, it's the people that we associate ourselves with. So whoever you associate yourself with kind of through school and university and then beyond, those associations and that environment really influences how we are with our money. And there's a whole thing of obviously around how the mindset kind of copes. But yeah, so likely if you've had parents who've kind of handled money badly and you've grown up around money feeling restricted, or your parents spending lots and them feel like debt, you'll have seen those consequences. So you might not naturally have known it's the kind of money feeling of that, but you'll have felt that through whatever aspect of your life you would have kind of dealt with. And so there's a lot of work, and this is a lot of the work that I do with kind of clients around kind of addressing those different things and kind of really rewiring the mind to think a bit differently around money.
Right. And you mentioned this region, right? I don't know for sure, but it's just a question I'm asking. In this region particularly, if you are here because of marriage, right? How does a woman sort of handle her finances independently? Can she do that?
I mean, she can do that. I think the region is opening up. I think for a long time, I think we were talking about earlier that you've naturally needed to be on your husband's visa to be able to, and sponsored by them, to open up a bank account. I think certain banks in this region, I believe, are opening up and enable you to have bank accounts without having a kind of fixed salary, so as to speak, kind of going in there. I know that there are a few open to doing that and understand that it's important to allow women and people who naturally are kind of in between jobs as well to have that sort of bank account. So I think things are evolving in this region to enable women to have their own bank account for sure. And I know other women are telling me as well that they've had that and been able to open those up and successfully do so they can start kind of building some sort of account for themselves. Yeah.
And, you talked about your movement, which also has so much to do with wellness, right? Mental wellness. And that kind of brings us to kind of that amazing term that we all talk about, self-love. It's all the rage. And then you've got financial freedom.
Yeah.
And self-love is supposed to be the key to financial freedom. To me, they're mutually exclusive. I mean, how do you get those two together?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So in my mind, when I talk a lot around financial wellness, so there's actually 4 pillars that make up the whole happiness, the state of being happy.
Right.
And financial is one alongside your mental, your social and emotional, physical well-being, and finance is that one element, and which is why I talk a lot about kind of financial wellness, because when you are empowered and in control of your money, that really sets everything else in your life.
Yeah.
So if you feel that having a healthy relationship with money, and you know where the money's coming in and how it's kind of been handled, and you can see a clear plan for your future. You talked there about kind of financial freedom. You know that you've got a plan in place to be able to do that. That enables you to set your whole life up. So very much I took the way about that financial wellness, because it really does impact your physical health as well. So you'll find there's a lot of statistics out there that show that if you've got high financial stress, that then impacts your sleep, your your mental, like diet, every single thing aspect, and it is the number one stress in relationships. It's the number one stress of most, single people as well, but it influences every single aspect of your life, which is why it's so important to build a healthy relationship with money, and one that you feel in control of. So that's the key thing I always come back to: control and empowered. And you feel that you know exactly where your financial plan is, and then that does help set you up for financial freedom.
So, what would your sort of top 3, top 5 tips be for someone to kind of start with that?
Yeah, so I think the important thing is really having a conversation with yourself, and obviously with your partner if you're in relationships as well, around what are your financial goals for in life. And that's the number one, to really kind of a key thing. And hopefully in relationships you can sit down to have that conversation, because when you're clear about what it is you want to achieve financially, you can then set a plan in place to then think about how you're going to achieve those things. So be really clear, and that very much can align with your life goals. So if you want to, for instance, I don't know, buy a house in 5 years' time, then you've got those kind of clear goals in mind, and you can work backwards from that in terms of saying, right, okay, in 5 years it's going to make me happy because I know that I'm going to be able to buy a house. In 10 years, I want to be able to set up a business, let's say, and you're kind of those sort of things. And then from then you can then start thinking about where you're going to put your money, how that money is going to grow, and how you can move things forward. And obviously it may be that you say, right, I want to retire in 20 years time or whatever it is. By that point, then you can think about, what are the means in which I can get there? So when we talk about working backwards and thinking about, okay, how much is it going to take, let's buying a house, whatever you need a deposit on that, you can work backwards and say, okay, in my mind, I need to put aside this amount of money each month. And that's when we go through to the next thing, which is thinking about a budget. So it's really helpful to kind of think through, how are you going to manage that money? And one of the ways in which I do that is talk through very much what I thought the 50, 30, 20 rule.
Okay.
Around budgeting, which is where you align 50% of your budget that comes in, the money that comes in, your salary, let's say, to your needs. So let's say rental payments, education, food, everything that you need in your life. And then 30% on your wants, because you need to have that mindful spending of things that you would bring you joy. And I talk a lot about having that healthy relationship with money and those things, because when you start restricting that, then you hate life altogether. Yeah. So you need to have it. And then 20%, at least 20%. Ideally in this region, a lot of people are aiming for a lot more than that in terms of savings, which is brilliant. But if you can at least look for that amount, and then that savings goal, that savings pot then can be broken down and thinking about where you want to invest and save for the future. So those are the sort of important things, but really importantly, having those conversations about and really dig into your relationship with money as well. So thinking through, like, how do I actually feel about money in my life? Does it bring me joy at the moment, or can I do things to strengthen that relationship? And there's a whole thing, I've developed a masterclass around very much building that.
Brilliant. Okay.
That healthy, wealthy mindset that asks all those questions, important questions, and then assesses what sort of money personality you are and how you can build those healthy habits that set you up for life. Because like I say, a lot of people kind of stuck at that very first point of, I don't feel like I'm worthy with money, worthy of money, or money doesn't come to me, or money's only for rich people. And actually, once you actually address all those kind of like limiting beliefs, I call them, you actually see that everybody's worthy of money and everybody can achieve it.
I mean, it is an energy exchange, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the way that I would kind of like approach it, like assess your relationship with money, think about those lifetime financial goals and how you want to kind of manage your money. And there's different means to be able to do that through saving and investing in the different models.
Are there, I don't know, now we've got a very, life is very digitized. There's all sorts of ways to invest. Are there apps, easy sort of digital tools that women can have access to start, doing these little sort of investments? And I mean, do you need to be a Dubai millionaire to do that? What is the amount of money you need to kind of say, okay, I want to start investing, or I want to, put some money in a pot, for a property, for example?
Yeah, so I think there's a common misconception around kind of investing in particular, that people think you need a lot of money to start investing. And I think for a long time that was the case in terms of when you look at the stock market.
Yep.
But actually we've made such huge progress over the last sort of 10, 15 years or so, where actually you can start investing from a very, very small amount of money. And there's such things as fractional shares, so where you see like investing in a company, let's say you don't necessarily need to invest in the whole share, which could be worth several $100, sorry, let's say, so to speak. You can invest from a really small amount of, and it's still own part of kind of companies. But going back to, so I think there's a few points that you kind of talked through there. Yes, there are lots of digital apps, and
can you name a few?
Yeah, so in this region, I think that when you think about those sort of apps in particular, you can obviously do it through your mainstream bank accounts, and they have those opportunities to kind of invest. But there are other ones called kind of like investment brokerage accounts, which very much allow you to kind of invest in funds, global kind of funds, which make up like hundreds or sometimes thousands of companies, and you can invest in those. I know there's companies like Sawa, which is part of Saxo Bank, for instance. That's a really good example, like a good example of a way in which you can do what we call like robo investing.
Okay. What is robo investing?
So robo investing is essentially where it provides you with almost like a ready-made model for you to kind of portfolio. So you don't necessarily have to go in there and pick your funds yourself. It kind of provides you, it assesses your risk tolerance. So how you kind of respond. So a lot of people perhaps are saying, well, like, it's my first time investing, I'm quite low risk, I want to just be really low risk. And in that way, the model that it creates you, and it asks you kind of like how long you want to invest for and what sort of things you're investing for, that sort of thing. And it then breaks it down in terms of how much would go on kind of shares, so to speak, which can give high, strong potential of investments, good returns, so to speak, but can be risky.
Okay.
And then it breaks down a proportion of how much would go into that, and then a proportion of how much would go into kind of bonds. So that's very much more kind of stable and lower risk, but lower returns.
Right.
So very much it depends on your appetite and how long. So my advice for a lot of people is, if you are thinking long term, and I always recommend at least sort of 10 years ideally to be thinking about investing when you want to kind of take your money out.
Yes.
Then you can afford a bit more risk, so to speak. So you can then kind of break down, and your proportion might be, let's say, 60, 70% sort of shares, and then 30, 40% sort of the bonds aspect. I hope I'm kind of like hopefully simplifying that. Yes. So what I'm saying, that the good thing of the apps like that is that you can see that, and it shows you where it's investing. So it'll say, I don't know, like US funds or world funds, and there's kind of the stocks. And then
so this app is a regional app that gives you access to all these international funds.
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of gives you that. And there's also which obviously the buzzword at the moment, but investment thing obviously is crypto, which I'm not going to go into here, because obviously there's very conflicting views, and I've seen people who've won but also lost. So I think everybody knows stories around that when it comes to crypto. But I think it has got potential out there. But there's apps like that with Sawa, which enable you to invest a small percentage into crypto. You don't need to worry about it. And that then helps you as part of that robo kind of managed fund, so to speak. So you're having a little dabble in if you want to kind of get involved, but you're not taking a big risk.
Right.
So that's that's just an example of ones. But there are other investment platforms out here, such as Interactive Brokers, and then there's eToro. eToro, that's a global kind of one again. But these sort of platforms enable you to, build your own sort of account. And then you can kind of choose the funds within that you want to kind of invest into. Outside of that, there are other investment sort of apps as well. So real estate investment apps that have come through the scene. Yeah. So investing in, you can actually, if you're interested in investing in property in Dubai, and I think they've actually moved now to Saudi as well, there are apps that enable you to invest from as low as kind of like 500 dirhams a month. So you can kind of invest, I think, well, 500, I know it's about 500 dirhams. Ideally, I think the first one's like, let's say 2,000. But that then enables you to kind of own a very, very tiny slice of a flat, let's say, alongside like hundreds of other people as well. So there's quite a few different kind of apps there. As I said, that I've just given you kind of a few examples, but I think the main point to get across to people is that you don't need a lot of money to get started.
Right.
And I think what I always encourage people, if you're first starting out investing, is to start small. give yourself like and work up that opportunity. So don't think, right, I've got to shove in like 20,000 dirhams and that's all I have and I'm worried about it. Just think about building it up and getting kind of comfortable and confident with the idea. So if you can, let's think like, okay, do you know what, this month I'll start investing like 5% of my salary and I'll set it up as direct debit to invest into whatever brokerage account or whatever it is that I'm doing. And then I can build up that and watch my investments sort of grow and build up that confidence over time. So yeah, hopefully.
That's really accessible and
Yes.
it's doable.
Yeah.
And it's also really interesting because the same report that we've been discussing, and there's a lot of different reports that talk about this. A woman's investment mindset is so different to a man's investment mindset. And then your investment mindset is different anyway at different ages and stages of your life. So, there's amazing people like you now who are empowering women and sort of, you're mobilizing the woman's mindset. But there's also some work to be done on the other side because you've got all these sort of, wealth managers or people in the banking industry. And so many of them are also women, but they're used to speaking a man's language, right?
It's so true.
So you've got to retrain people how to deal in terms of how they need to deal with women and talk to women and understand, okay, this is where she's coming from and this is how I need to advise her.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that?
Yeah. No, it's really true, actually. And a stat that I saw, which is really alarming, and I talked about it recently, but I think I saw it in a CNBC study that 86% of asset managers say they are actively targeting male customers. So they are actively targeting. So they're disregarding kind of female investors, and very much the language that they're using is targeted to the male audience. And that's still today. So that's,
and I mean, you're missing out on a large pot of investable wealth by doing that.
Yeah, this is so true. So I think, like you said, I think it's really encouraging that the figures that you talked about at the start, that yes, more and more women are investing and more women are growing wealth, which is super encouraging. But I think there's a lot that we can do around understanding around languages. And there's so many women out there who want to invest, but feel intimidated. And I think because of the conversations have very much been aimed at the man and aimed at kind of how their investment preferences, they've kind of, like you say, for so long, they've disregarded. But yeah, in terms of women as investors, actually, there are a lot of statistics that say that women outperform men when it comes to investing, because a lot of women naturally are kind of, not saying like less risk takers, but they are very considerate and careful with what they're investing in. They understand about investing for the long term, and they understand about diversification, which are the key principles around thinking about investing. So when you ask like even the big investment gurus like Warren Buffett and the others, they very much talk about diversification and the importance of doing that to spread the risk. So you're not just putting all your investments in one company, you're ensuring that you're investing across multiple companies and multiple countries as well, so as to kind of like hedge your bets, for the long term as well. So yeah, women naturally like to invest in sustainable investments as well. So they want to make sure that they are investing in, like you say, ESG and those companies that kind of provide that. So I know there's a movement as well called Female Invest.
Female Invest.
They're actually a European group of women who've created this, and they've actually brought out a book called, I think, Girls Just Want to Have Funds.
Lovely.
And they've brought one very much around how to invest sustainably as well. So very much because they know that women want to invest, put their money in the right place. And these are conversations that I'm having with the women as well, like, because they know that obviously there are companies out there that perhaps don't align with their values, and that's totally understandable. But there are certain funds that you can invest into to make sure it's sustainable. So yeah, I think it's about thinking about, like I say, women are more interested in investing for the long term. They don't see it as a get rich quick thing, which I'm not saying that men are like that, but I think it's this very different alignment in terms of women want to get involved and they see the long term benefits of investing, and therefore when they're investing in that way, and we talk about passive versus active, so passive, those kind of long-term investment funds over a longer term period, that's when you see a lot of those kind of good benefits from that as well.
And then there's that little thing we call compound interest that's sort of hard to understand, right?
Yeah, so compound interest, I mean, the way that compound interest works is very much interest on top of your interest. So the longer you leave your money in there, the more that your money is growing. So if you even, and the better it works is obviously if you, let's say you're putting in like $1,000 a month, I'll just give an example, then the interest that will, let's say it's 10% on top of that, then each month on top of that, you'll earn money on the like 1,100 or whatever it is that you're, and then that'll grow and grow and grow. And so you're earning interest on top of that interest. And that's where where you see the value. And they do encourage you to invest as early as you possibly can. So obviously for our audience, thinking around it for our children's sake, one of the biggest regrets, and I think we're seeing this now that the investment conversations are more mainstream, is that I wish for my sake I'd started investing as soon as I was in my very early 20s, because if I'd have just put aside that small amount, like it would have worked wonders. Like I think when you think about when you get to your mid-30s and you want to buy a house, let's say, or you want to settle down, and that money that you could have invested, like the potential even at that point, and then think, let alone the million or so that you'd get by the time you're kind of in your 50s, 60s, because you started investing from such a young age. Like I said, the compound interest has had that period of time to really grow and develop so strongly.
And it's so interesting, right? We've learned it all in school. It was part of our curriculum.
So I challenge that, because I don't think so. Most people,
but we've learned it as sort of math calculations.
Oh, math calculations.
Do you know what I mean? We never realized the deeper significance of it.
No, you're right. Yeah,
we never learned how to apply it.
No, exactly. Right? Yeah. So I agree with you. I think it's only when you put it into kind of perspective as to what does it actually mean for you and the money that you earn each month. Exactly. So I'm 100% part of my mission is to go into schools and universities to very much talk about bringing this into the curriculum. I know in the UK they're starting to think about they're making that mandatory, and I really would love so much to make that mandatory here as well, because I think there's wonders that can do for talking to our children and really seeing about that for the future.
I agree. Now, Beth, we've got women who are thriving, and then we've got women with kids who unfortunately probably took career breaks, to raise their kids, and are stuck in sort of loveless, abusive marriages all around the world. How does a woman like that sort of pick up and try to leave without any financial means? How does she kind of mobilize herself?
It's a really challenging one. And it's a common theme that I've been hearing as well as and I think we all know, I think unfortunately a lot of us probably do know somebody who's going through that situation, and it's so sad. And like you said, it's not just here, it's across the world, right? As I said, unfortunately the finances are the number one cause in relationship breakdowns and relationship arguments, actually above affairs, would you believe?
Wow.
Yeah, so it actually comes down to finances. But that being said, I think there are various aspects. It depends the means in which she's receiving money. And that's why I kind of point that out very much in terms of how money is being managed in the relationship. I mean, the first point, going back a step before that, is hopefully, where possible, having those open conversations about money. If you start at that point and very much ideally understanding how the money is being managed in the relationship and in the household. I think asking those questions and understanding where it's coming from. And unfortunately, sadly, there are situations where money is hidden or not necessarily divulged in those sort of relationships. But I think having those open conversations, understanding around that is number one. The second thing has been educating yourself. So take that time to read and find those resources around financial education. That is something you can do right now, regardless of where the money is in the relationship. Understand and educate yourself so that you understand how to manage your money and how you can make it grow and how you can get out of those relationships and build it once you're out of that relationship as well, importantly. Right. And what are the means to do that? And one of the things I talk about, obviously, the Freedom Fund, and that can apply to relationships. So it can also apply to getting out of a job. It can also apply to setting up a business. So those things are very much like building like a freedom fund. So what is the amount of money that you need to live off? And that's very much kind of going back to kind of like, what categorically will my expenses be when with my children, or what do I need that money to be? And I think that having the conversation, being really clear and doing a clear budget around what it is that you need, and then thinking about how you're going to get there. Now, talking about the point around...
That's a great name, by the way, Freedom Fund.
Yeah. So talking about how you're getting it in terms of the money being managed. So the challenge comes obviously where perhaps you're spending on a credit card. That can be hard because there's not that
Right.
option then to kind of take
Take
away
it
that
out. Yeah.
out as easily. But if you are able to kind of ensure that you can get some of your money, whether obviously if that's for whatever you're living off each month, for day-to-day spending in cash, whether it's in a bank account or physical cash, that's helpful because from that perspective, then you can start thinking about how can I make a budget? How can I reduce some spending? So start tucking away a little bit of money each month into a separate pot that I can have, that's going to enable me to kind of have a little grounding that once I leave that relationship, that I've got set aside. And obviously I would definitely encourage women to have conversations with and seek support from friends and family as well.
Yeah.
Because that's really key as well. Like in those sort of situations where it's not easy to access that money, sometimes you will naturally going to need to lean on kind of friends and family to help you and support you. And hopefully use resources that hopefully that I can provide through forums like mine and those coaching opportunities as well, and lessons and speak to kind of a financial coach about how you can get out and manage a budget and a fund to get you on within your life. But yeah, importantly, have those open conversations, ask those questions, and then think about educating yourself. So what are the resources and books that you can do to kind of make sure that you're kind of clued up about money in general? And you'll find that reading those, it won't become as like
Intimidating.
Exactly.
Yes. Right. Any books in mind? Any really simple ones to start with?
Yeah, so the ones that I think I mentioned earlier, so Girls That Invest.
Girls Just Want to Have
That's
Fun.
the one.
I love it.
So Girls Just Want to Have Fun. So that's a really good one to kind of start with. And there's different podcasts as well. So Girls That Invest is separate.
Okay.
Female group of women who are based out in New Zealand, and they talk about kind of investing and managing money as well, but in like really layman's terms. So there's like podcasts like that I would definitely recommend as well. There's another one that I've just got on the top of my head. I'll send them over. You can include them in the show notes afterwards. But
Brilliant.
There's various ones. And The Millionaire Teacher, that's another one by Andrew Hallam.
I think there's something called The Psychology of Money. My husband's telling me to read that for a long time. I've been meaning to read it.
So there is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. That's one of my favourite books as well. But that very much, so I do recommend that book, but that very much looks at the kind of, the psychology around money, which I think is really important. But if there's, in terms of managing money in the day-to-day things, there's kind of more kind of books around, like I said, thinking of it at that kind of local level.
And in terms of conversations, what conversation would Beth have with her daughter today about money?
Yeah, so my daughter's 5 years old, and I'm trying to have those open conversations now around kind of money, and show her that at the moment, that money is a tool and it can provide you with opportunities. And we very much have those conversations around why is mummy working and what does that mean? Well, that means mummy brings in money that supports us, and understanding that money is there to provide us with opportunities, but money doesn't, you need to own those opportunities. And that's where kind of money plays an important part. And I've started teaching her around the importance of kind of saving money and putting aside money for positive things and things that you want to kind of have in life. So you see it as a tool for good and a tool that brings kind of those opportunities. But I think going back to my point about, I would encourage her to be financially educated, to be confident when asking about money, and to think about money as I say, a positive thing that can provide you with those opportunities. But thinking and getting into investing, obviously, as well, kind of thinking about using money to grow wealth for the future, but not just something that's seen to be spent, but money to be enjoyed for the short term, but also for the long term.
It was really interesting when I was looking up, I was doing my research and I was, reading about investing and money, and I came across such an amazing quote by the diva of all divas, Cher.
Yeah.
And she said, "My mum said to me, sweetheart, one day you should settle down and marry a rich man. And I said, Mom, I am a rich man.
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
So Beth, thank you so much.
Thank you.
How does someone get in touch with you?
So you can reach me on Finance So Well. So I'm on Instagram and the website, if you just type in Finance So Well.
Okay. And how do they access this amazing masterclass? I want to do it as soon as I'm done with this show.
Yeah. So there's a link on my Instagram. It's also on my website as well. So you can access it. It's right at the top. How to build a healthy, wealthy mindset for life. It's like really, I've got an affordable price out at the moment for it. It's about 45 minutes long, but lots of different modules that really break down everything from understanding money personalities through to those limiting beliefs, through to how you think about growing wealth for life.
So 45 minutes is ideal.
I know.
Not too long, not too short.
Well, that's what I thought. And it's like little kind of 12 mini kind of modules that you kind of dive into those particular topics and kind of dip in, dip out. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here.
As we wrap up this episode of the Learning Series, stay curious and keep that mind open. We hope you found inspiration and insight to fuel your journey. Stay tuned for more discussions, and until next time, keep learning and keep growing. Bye for now.